All right. Well, welcome everyone to today's roundtable, focused on the importance of women execs in VC. The aim of the panel today is to dive deeper into the biases that occur in the venture capital ecosystem, what the impact is on the women that do choose to navigate it, and what toolkit we can give to the next generation of female investors and founders to best enable them to succeed. I'm Kessie, VP of Commercial for Levin Group. We are a global tech talent marketplace with US offices in New York and Dallas, and our global expertise spans continental Europe and Singapore. This event is in conjunction with our Women's Network Parity, so focused on tackling all forms of gender bias through a special focus on intel and external mentoring, empowering our female identifying employees as positive ambassadors globally as well. I'm excited for today. We have formidable talent from the world of financial services, fintech, and green tech on our panel, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be hosting. So I'm going to pass over to our panelists to introduce themselves individually. Asya, if you'd like to start.
Great. Thanks, Kessie. My name is Asya Bradley. I'm with Mendoza Ventures. We are a VC firm that's headquartered in Boston. I head up the San Francisco West Coast office. We invest in AI, cybersecurity, and fintech companies as early as seed stage and as far into Series A, B, and C. I myself am a former founder and have founded a couple of companies in the fintech space and have had some good exits. And so started my journey as an angel investor and now in formal VC.
Amazing. Thank you. Ramsay, if I can pass over to you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm Ramsay Siegal, a partner at Earthshot Ventures, and we are a climate tech fund based in San Francisco and Honolulu, Hawaii. And we support companies pre-seed to Series B, sort of climate generalist, energy, mobility, food and agriculture, and industry and carbon. So sort of anything to decarbonize our world is fair game. We've made our first 15 investments and look forward to the conversation today.
Thanks. And last but not least, Julie.
Hi, everyone. So I come to this from gender and racial justice. So I have kind of a different lens. How Women Invest is, as far as we know, the only venture firm in the United States that only funds companies founded by women with no male co-founders. We're trying to address the fact that only 2% of all venture funding goes to companies founded by women. And now fintech and climate tech are huge for us. So super excited to learn from my sisters here. But I'm sort of in this mission right now to make sure that we change this ecosystem and that we get women investing in venture, leading in venture. So I'm so jazzed, Kessie, that you brought us together today to really sort of move the needle.
Good, great. Yeah, I mean, I'm incredibly excited, and I think that all of your insights and how this will run with you guys speaking together, I think it's been hugely insightful. So thank you all for your time. So I want to kick off with looking at your individual journeys into VC. At Levin, we motivate ourselves through the concept of a why. I know a lot of businesses do this, but the idea that, the passion behind your work is what gets you out of bed in the morning. Recruitment isn't always the first career path that people think of when they leave college, but when you are really aligned with a mission and truly committed to disruption for good, I actually think recruitment and staffing is a really incredible tool for changing people's lives. I see VC that way. It's also an incredibly powerful tool for social change, but the world of venture capital and financing can seem very closed off and unattainable for women in particular, but certainly for people who don't fit the stereotypical investor profile. Ramsay, in our previous conversation, you gave me the stat that for venture capital in the US, the profile is 86% white male, and around 40% of which went to Harvard or Yale. And I know you originally were studying to be an architect. So how did you become aware of VC as an opportunity in a world that you could step into?
Just for that statistic, it's Harvard and Stanford.
Harvard and Stanford, thank you.
Similar sort of, top tier schools. So when I was in high school, I was really interested in art and math and was trying to think about ways that you could combine those two things, and ended up going to architecture school. And in the study of buildings and high performance building design, got really interested in the LEED certification process, which in 2002 was just emerging. And I enjoyed the design of the buildings, but I was much more passionate about decarbonizing buildings, designing solar for them, figuring out how the grid can support these buildings. And then eventually my passion and obsession with this led to decarbonizing everything, not just the building sector. So instead of pursuing a career in architecture, I decided to sell solar, commercial scale solar, to schools and universities in Northern California after college. And that was a pretty controversial decision, because when you have a seat in architecture school, it's kind of like a ticket in one direction. And I sort of went against the grain. But I'm so glad I did, because I wake up every morning so excited about the work that we're doing. And you know, I think most people have an unlikely path into venture because they're pursuing what they love and just pulling that thread as far as they can. And sometimes it leads to venture and other things. So what I love about venture, and I previously worked at an accelerator, is this idea of a portfolio-based approach for climate action. So you're not just selling solar, you know, software for the utility sector or solar panels to schools, but you have 150 options for climate action, different tools in the tool chest that you can pull upon. And in the portfolio-based approach, some will be successful and others will fail, and that's okay. That's sort of the game we're playing, and creating that support network is really important. I think one thing that I have learned that's been really striking is that you think of venture as a technology business, supporting and finding great technologies, but it's really a people business. And it's about the people behind the scenes and in front of the scenes that are making strategic decisions every day that can take a company in completely different directions. So beyond sort of technology scouting, we're really talent scouting. And that's why it's so important to have people from all walks of life and all backgrounds represented in the sector.
Absolutely. I love that piece around, you know, pulling that thread and taking what you're passionate about and running as far as that mission can take you. Asya, I'd like to touch on your journey then, because I think your early career, when we've spoken before, you've worked with the World Health Organization, you've worked for UNICEF. How did you move from that sphere of work into, you know, founding fintechs and joining a VC firm?
For sure. Such a great memory you've got, Cassie. That's really impressive. Yeah, I mean, I've always been in social justice in some way, shape, or form. It's been something that's really important to me in terms of making sure that everyone has access to basic human rights, and not just basic, just human rights in general. And so I started off actually in the tech sector at Cisco Systems, and just felt that I wasn't okay just making bucket loads of money. I needed to do more to impact the world around me. And so I actually just had a sort of wake up moment where I thought, I need to quit what I'm doing. You know, I've got some money in the bank. Let me just go and see the world a little bit, and found myself in the Middle East. And that's actually when I started my work with the different nonprofit organizations and the world organizations. A lot of it was just based on the stuff that nobody else wanted to do. So, you know, when you're in the Middle East and you're working on UNIFEM initiatives, or you're working on, you know, World AIDS Day initiatives that nobody else wanted to take care of. And so that was kind of what I ended up wanting to do. Moved from the Middle East when the revolution started in Egypt, and so found myself in the USA and started founding companies. Really wanted to do things that were a little bit more impactful and would be a bit more exponential versus just a one-on-one sort of whatever amount of time I could invest in something, and that would be the outcome. And so as a founder, what I found was that when I started looking to the left and right of me, I didn't see people that looked like me as fellow founders, as VC funded, VC backed founders. And that was really disturbing. And that was also just not as much fun. You know, you're out here trying to make change happen, and the products that you're looking for and the type of vendors that I'm looking for, I couldn't find those products in the marketplace because the people building them did not look like me. They didn't have the same problems I had. And so I started writing checks to startups on my own. And so I was like, I want to see more women. I want to see more Black people. I want to see more brown people founding and being funded and being given that opportunity that all the Harvard and Stanford grads have, that all the men have. And so I just started writing checks out of my own family office. And then I realized that in order to really move the needle, and this is, you know, something that, you know, Serena Williams actually just recently said in her Vanity Fair article, was that people that look like me need to start writing the checks. And that's the only thing that's going to change what's going on. And I just found that slowly and slowly, I was spending more time and finding more joy in writing the checks and finding these amazing people. As Ramsay said, it's not about the technology, it's about the people, it's about the founders, especially when you're writing these early checks into these companies. You're really assessing who you think is going to be able to make that pivot, make the hard decisions to actually build those long-lasting, sustainable companies. And Julie, something I forgot to say about Mendoza Ventures, in terms of like, we don't invest only in women founders, but our portfolio is very, very conscious about who we're backing in terms of, if there is a female founder, we want to make sure she's not sitting there with 1% equity, right? And just has a title of co-founder. And now they can apply for all the female accelerators. But that's what we do. And over 80% of our portcos are actually diverse in terms of being female, LGBTQ, people of color, immigrants, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that's a really important point that Julie brought up earlier.
Definitely. Fantastic. I want to probe really quickly then. So you said, you looked left, you looked right, you didn't see people necessarily that looked like yourself. What goes through your mind at that stage? You don't strike me as somebody that gets intimidated, but that is an intimidating scenario to be in. How do you take that experience and turn it into something that makes you proactive and not something that is, frankly, depressing?
Yeah, I mean, I think you allow yourself to be depressed. So I think you want to always allow the feelings that are happening to happen, let them surface, acknowledge them, honor them, and then move on. A lot of the times when you try to just avoid them, they just end up coming back in inopportune moments. And so I would say, number one, honor those feelings that you've got, go through it, but then come back with a plan. Right. And that was the plan. So for me, it was a matter of what can I do? When we were putting together our goals and our mission statement for Kinley, for example, which was when you and I first started talking, the whole thing is that what are we actually building towards? And all of us are sitting there waiting for someone to solve this problem. And so one of our mission statements or one of our goals was, we are who we've been waiting for. And so if we're not able to stand up and do this and make the change happen ourselves, who's going to do it for us, right? And I have a nickname. People laugh at it because I very often will act before I actually think something through all the way. So I'm Action Asya. My husband makes fun of me about that all the time. But I think sometimes it's important because when you overthink, you just become, stagnant and you forget that you actually can take action. And if you make a mistake, it's okay. Own up to it and keep moving. And I've made a million mistakes. But I think that's really what it came down to, was going down and thinking about what can I do specifically in this moment. And when I started joining various groups, various Slack groups, various WhatsApp groups, a whole bunch of different text chains that I'm part of now, where I was finding amazing women, amazing Black men and women, amazing LGBTQ teams that were building things that did not have access to capital. And I thought, how can I help? I started first by reading term sheets for them and preventing them from signing predatory term sheets. And then being able to say, okay, that is a shit term sheet. Do not sign it. But here is a check. Because it's not enough to just say, don't sign it. They need the money to build. And then being able to be in that position, that privileged position where I could say, okay, I've got some money in my family office. I'm going to write your first check so that you don't have to take this predatory term sheet. And then working with them, guiding them, mentoring them, building with them. So not just words and advice, but actually rolling up my sleeve, working on pro formas, et cetera, but then helping to make introductions to my existing network of VCs. And my existing network of VCs, I have amazing allies in here. So it's not just about only finding female funders and only finding Black funders and only finding diverse funders. It's a matter of how do we coach ourselves, each other, to maneuver within the existing VC space so that we can tap into the capital that's already there until we get to the moment where Julie's work is a true success and we have all of us out there being able to write checks.
Amazing. I think we could all get that tattooed, couldn't we? You are the person that you've been waiting for. I absolutely love that. And then Julie, yeah, straight into you, because I know that, you began your career with a mindset around social work, and that personal passion for helping people really funneled your journey into VC. So I would love to hear a little bit more about your career path.
Sure. Well, I worked in, I ran a microfinance and microenterprise organization. It was actually the largest in the United States, exclusively funding companies, helping women start companies and funding them. So half was in Spanish. So one of the things that was so great about that is not only, do I have restaurants and hair salons and things I get, that I helped found and fund, all around the place. So friends everywhere. And these women are still in business 20 years later. But, I absolutely saw at that time, I worked with low income women entrepreneurs. Only a couple were ever going to look for venture funding. But when they were looking for funding, there were all kinds of problems and limits. So we have a huge problem with access to capital in our country. We had all kinds of structural systems that end up both being predatory, like Asya was just saying, but also, protectionist that ultimately ends up excluding people, right? So we have market issues that we all need to solve. So I come at this from let me solve problems. So I have a network of 15,000 women that I brought together, and we all try to solve problems together. So we all put $10 million into a fund in 2020 in a couple months. I think we all wanted to be part of something bigger than ourselves. And I started to see some interesting things, right? All these women, 85% invested for the first time in venture, 50% were women of color. This is what people said. They said, no one's ever invited me. I thought being an accredited investor meant I had to go do a bunch of work and take a class and fill out a bunch of forms and, disclose my firstborn child and everything else, and so we've got all kinds of misinformation out there about what it takes for women to invest in venture. And we just don't feel invited and doesn't feel safe. And the truth is, the lingo and the bro culture is so real. And so we need to create our own. We need to build it ourselves. I'm older than everybody on this call. But so I'm 55 years old. We are the first generation of us where we have 30 years of work experience. I have power and influence and wealth completely. You couldn't compare it to anybody from 30 years ago. And if you aggregate all of us together, we could change the situation that we're looking at in every possible way. So when women invest, when Asya and Ramsay are investing, the data says, and I assume it's the same for you guys, that you're investing 40% of the investments are in companies founded by women, because you have a different mindset. Well, we just don't have enough women as investors and women as decision makers in venture, and that's what's causing the cyclical problem for us. So I have a goal to get 10,000 women to invest in venture for the first time, starting in January, and really connecting them to great women-founded venture firms and run venture firms, so that we can just change it and stop asking for permission, stop asking for room at the table. So that's kind of that's my jam. But anybody who people. Even women VCs, when I first started, they were like, "Oh, they're not women who are creating venture backable companies." It's like that. Who says that? Are you kidding? We have the companies we're seeing. We saw over 500 women-run companies in the last year that are all fantastic. So we just have bias and misinformation. We got to change that. It hurts everybody.
The problem really is that those companies are not grocery delivery companies.
Exactly.
That's the thing. It's like women are building what we need, what the community needs, what society needs.
Yeah. Let me give you an example. Yeah. Like Baby Quip. Fran Meyer was one of the original founders of Match.com. And that was her first startup, and they sold it. She was part of the team that sold it too early, and somebody else made the big money on Match.com. So, this is her fifth venture that she's been running. And think about all the stuff she now knows. She's not going to make any of those mistakes ever again. She's got 1,100 women that are making on average $1,000 a month of additional income, being quality providers through Baby Quip. She was on the list of the top platforms from Andreessen Horowitz. Like, she's killing it. And we're so excited to be along, as partners and supporting her in this ride. But she's solving a problem for all of us. Any of you have kids? Don't you remember trying to travel with those kids and all that equipment? she has a solution. You show up where you're going, and someone has the car seat and the, anything that you need, they've got it all ready for you. When you land, it's clean. You can pick what type of, thing you want, and you can even, practice with something that you might want to buy later. Like, no man's going to come up with a solution like that for us.
Like you say, it's solving a problem, and Asya, I think you're absolutely bang on. What women are doing is solving problems in communities where they're investing and how they spend that money. I think are more likely to be mission-driven investors. I assume, Ramsay, obviously through the you said through working through the accelerator model, you've helped and worked with so many amazing women leaders. Why do you think the model that I know Earthshot says a lot of its DNA with Elemental Accelerator, why do you think that's so impactful?
Yeah, I mean, I think at least in the climate tech sector, there are a lot of women who have aggregated capital from different places, government grants, family offices, individuals that have provided funding. And the way I think about the accelerator model is that it's about 70% support services, wraparound sort of nurturing services for the startup, and 30% pursuing companies and building the pipeline. And it's the inverse for venture, right? So less support services, more out there scouting. This is a generalization, right? Each firm is different, but I think women are naturally very good at building networks and bringing people together and creating community. And we have seen that in climate tech just in absolutely stellar ways. So Powerhouse Ventures, which is based in the Bay Area, Greentown Labs, many others, Elemental Accelerator run by Dawn Lippert, my colleague. And so that has created this new class of fund managers sort of by default, because, by virtue of running an accelerator, investing in Elemental's case, 150 companies at this point. So bringing up the next class, and really has us curious, how can we support the next class of fund managers and create those ladders up for the next generation?
Absolutely. I think it is that ladders up piece. So what I'd like to dig into then is, what does that toolkit look like in terms of helping people? How do we most have impact on those who don't have the resources of family or connections within the VC community? Asya, is there particular advice that you would give to women execs that are going up for funding at the first time?
Yeah, I actually tell people to just be open and just connect randomly. Just do it. A lot of the time we sort of hinder ourselves, right? We hold ourselves back a lot. We think we're not quite ready, or we think we need to take a course before we can, suggest ourselves or nominate ourselves for something. But I always say, just go ahead and just reach out. So if you find Julie on LinkedIn, or you find me on LinkedIn, or Ramsay, just connect with us, send us a message, right? Sure, we're busy, but the chance of us responding is still pretty high. And even if we don't respond, what have you really lost beyond a couple of seconds of sending out a message on LinkedIn? So I always say, just reach out, send a very, detailed ask. So don't just say hey, I want to take you out for a coffee, or can I have 5 minutes of your time? But sort of say, hey, Asya, I noticed that you know somebody from Ignite Excel. I am a consumer facing business. I know that Ignite Excel invests in this company, this type of company. Here is my deck. Would you mind sharing it with Claire? If I see something like that with a very clear ask, I will very quickly forward that over to Claire and be like, hey, Claire, are you interested? If she says yes, I'll make the intro. If she says no, it takes me 2 seconds to say, hey, thanks for your message. I shared it with Claire. She said no. Right. So I say, always make sure you do that. Very, very clear ask. And honestly, all of us have seen this shit. We've lived in the shit. We've played in it, and we know how to get out of it clean. We all cleaned up pretty nicely here today. And so we will understand what you all are going through, and we genuinely want to help. We wouldn't be doing this and being on these panels if we didn't want to help. So make it as easy as possible for us to help. The other thing is nominate yourself, right? Very often, like men, for example, I don't know the exact statistics, but it's ridiculous. It's something like they will satisfy 20 to 40% of a job description and go in there thinking they're 150, right? And we will satisfy like 100% of the job and think we're only 20%. So just ignore all of those self-doubting, voices, and just go ahead and apply for those jobs, apply for those seats, apply for everything, for the panel roles, volunteer for these things. Again, get used to rejection. It's okay. You're not going to die. I get rejected all the time. I always say, like, for my Series A fundraise that we closed last year in July, I spoke to 200 different VCs, right? 200. So how many of those were no's, right? Most of them. But we raised a $15 million Series A round on the heels of a $5 million seed round for the startup. So we raised a total of $20 million within 11 months of incorporating our company. That's because we didn't let the no's dig into us too deep. You acknowledge it, you feel the pain, you feel the burn, and you let that propel you further. So I say, just keep going, reach out, be tenacious, don't be afraid, and just let the no's fuel you to go further.
Such a lesson in tenacity and resilience. And I think I'm probably not the only person that feels that way, but that transparency is so valuable. I don't think everybody speaks about however many different people you speak to that give you the no before you get the yeses that you need. And it's not the number, that number of no's hasn't impacted your success or the success of that raise in any way, shape, or form. So that's an amazing thing to learn. Julie, I know you very specifically have thoughts on the 80% of a job ad and application, and us getting in our own heads, and how women can actually be the change makers as opposed to sitting and self-doubting. With that campaign of getting 10,000 women to invest in VC for the first time, what questions should those women be asking?
Well, so I just want to say, Asya, thank you for that beautiful example, because the truth is, we go into this space so in love with our solution. And it's like someone telling you your baby's ugly. But the truth is, I have a thesis to meet. I told my investors in me in our venture firm, I was going to do certain things and meet certain criteria. So it doesn't mean that your baby's not beautiful. It just means that I can't, at this moment in time, you're not meeting the box I have to fit you in. So now women get more rejections than men. So one of the things I would say is, like, go get yourself an executive coach or some kind of friend who helps you, like, do that pivot faster. You might have thick skin like Asya, but some of us need somebody who helps us, like, says, you did a good job, keep going. And so get that help if you need it. I'm sorry, Cassie, I went off on a tangent, but your specific question was about sort of, tell me that again, like how we were, how women.
Absolutely. I mean, I adore the tangents. I've got all the time in the world for the tangents. It was, you want to get 10,000 women to invest in VC for the first time. What questions should they be asking?
Yeah. Well, to me, if you're going to look at investing in venture, first and foremost, we just did research on the investing behavior of women. Okay. We're more likely to invest in mutual funds, and men are more likely to invest in individual stocks. And we win. We make more money as investors because we're more responsible, and we've managed risk better. So we're not risk averse, we're more risk aware. So I really want you guys to understand that we just are different, and frankly, it makes us better. And so investing in venture as opposed to angel investing can actually be a great thing for you. Angel investing is a little bit like picking stocks. You're picking one company, and I'm an expert venture capitalist, right? I know how to evaluate these companies, do due diligence, negotiate a term sheet, all that other good stuff. If you might not. And furthermore, a venture fund is 15 to 30 companies. So you have a small investment in all of those companies if you invest in the venture firm. So I think that that's super important for people to understand. And so if you're going to go invest in another venture firm, first and foremost, I would just say, what is important to me, where my values align. Don't just go in there and let them tell you what they're up to. Come with some questions ready. So this is what I would say. For me, how many women founders are in your portfolio? Simple question. And if they avoid answering that question, you might have a problem on your hands. If climate's important to you, tell me about your, if you do investments in climate, how many have you done? And if not, do you ask any ESG or impact measurements reports from the portfolio companies that you have? And how many women are decision makers? How many people of color are in your portfolio? You have a right as an investor to ask all of those questions. And if we're going to change the market, if you want to make the most money, women and people of color make more money for their investors. So those are financial questions, not just mission, values questions, even though our research also should reinforce what Cassie, you just said, which is women are more likely to invest along with their values. And I'll tell you another secret. Once you turn about 45, it's a life stage called midolescence. It's like the opposite of adolescence in many ways, but it's also a moment of a lot of change, developmental change for a lot of us, right? Women are happier if we're having an impact. And if we're doing it with other women once we get to our mid 40s. So there's some interesting things that, that you might want to consider as you're thinking about investing, and make sure that you're doing it in a way that adds value to your life. I would also say if you're an individual and want to invest, saying I've invested in venture, often at a dinner party or at a business meeting, people treat you differently. It's kind of a power play. So you can make more money. Certainly more money than the stock market this year. I have 2 companies that sold at 3x after just 6 to 12 months. One was 6 months and the other was a little over 12 months. And that's way better than my portfolio in the stock market. So
I'll add some more questions to that, Cassie and Julie, if that's okay. So very specifically, ask them who's on the investment committee, right? Ask them who is part of the GP. So who has the general partnership? Because often they'll be able to point out and say, oh, look, I've got this principal and this associate, and those tend to be the women and the people of color. But they don't have that weight when it comes to the actual investment committee in terms of being able to really decide who gets, gets the investment. The other thing is like learning if you want to become an LP in a VC fund, so a limited partner, that's the person that's investing in a VC fund, is find out things like what is a capital call. So there were a lot of things that I myself, before I became an LP in a couple of different funds, I just thought that I needed to have $1 million sitting there and I would have to write this check right at once and hand it over right away. And so when some of my girlfriends were saying they were, LPs in a fund, they never told me how easy it was to do that. And honestly, I still hold a grudge, right? Of like, how shitty was that you knew how to do this and you never told me, you never shared it. And so I'm like loud about it now. It's super easy to become an LP. You can do it with as little as $10,000 even. A lot of LPs have very low minimums depending on how they structure their funds. And a lot of them will actually set up these sidecar funds that will allow a more inclusive LP base. Because a lot of these funds that are set up, for example, you can only have 99 LPs. And so if someone comes in with a $10,000 check, they won't let you in. But now they've become a little bit more open to this and realize like, hey, we want more people to be able to be at the table of the LP table. And so find out, for example, what is the minimum check size that you'll take. Also find out this thing called capital calls, which means even if you commit to $100,000 commitment in it as an LP check, you may not have to pay that all at once, and most likely you do not. So that could be something that is split up over 4 payments over the course of a year, 2 years, 4 years. Every single VC sets it up differently based on their own sort of deal economics, right? Their own LP economics. And so you might find that, hey, for example, I was as a chief revenue officer, I had a lot of bonuses that were coming in. And so a quarterly capital call worked very well with my quarterly bonus. And so I could commit 100,000 to multiple different VCs because I was getting these quarterly checks, and that was very easy for me to meet these capital calls. But I think these are the kind of things that we just practically don't know, because as women, we don't talk money like this. We just don't. We will spend a lot of time, talking about our children, about our families, our friends. But for example, I gave birth 2 weeks ago. And my baby, my thought here is like, what am I going to do to safeguard the future of my fourth child, right? What do I do for him? As I'm getting closer, 50 is right around the corner. What am I doing to safeguard my retirement, right? So that my children aren't left having to take care of me. So yes, I can still think about my family. I can still think about and talk about my loved ones and all those other things that women are expected to care about, but I have to link it to the financial responsibility that I have as a human and as the caretaker of these children and my family. And so we got to break out of that mindset of the man does that, No, the caretaker does it.
It's so true. And I think, oh, sorry, go on, Julie.
I was just going to say, one of the things we saw, the 85% of the people who invested for the first time with us, within a year, 30% are investing in 2 to 3 other venture firms. Yeah. So one of the things we're seeing is all women have to do is like cross the line, get your confidence. And Asya, you said something so important about this minimum and this 99 investor rule. When I was talking about the structural problems, that's an example of one of the things we need to change, because it's exclusionary. It means wealthy people just keep getting wealthier. And someone who I would, who's like a more normal person, accredited investors making $200,000 a year for 2 years in a row. That is very accessible to a lot of Americans. And people just don't know that that's the line that they can cross. So one of the things I'm doing is I'm working on legislation at the federal level to remove that 99 investor rule, or to change it to make it 499 up to 50 million, so that there's a much bigger chance that women and people of color get to play in venture and start to really become actors. Even if you have a lot of wealth, I think often for a lot of us that you don't want to make a mistake unless you have the time to go research, etc. You just someone needs to invite you in to like walk across the line simply without having a lot of, have to do a lot of work for a lot of us who are super busy. And then they get the bug, and then they feel like they can do more.
Yeah, just need them to catch that bug. And I think it's almost like self-fulfilling prophecy, but we're socialized that way, aren't we? Don't talk about money, and that it isn't appropriate, or that it's something that women shouldn't engage in conversation with their friends. I would definitely also be holding a grudge, I feel, with my friends if I was in that position. But you're trying to break, what you're trying to really shatter is social norms, and they're incredibly powerful. I think VC is an incredible first step for really driving that change. Ramsay, I wanted to ask you, I know you're a big believer in people being mission driven, obsessed with what they do. Asya, you're linking that to family and thinking, okay, well, if I'm trying to safeguard the future of my fourth child and, being able to retire and not worry about my family looking after me, and that can drive the financial goals that you have and what you're trying to attain. Ramsay, what's your view on people, linking their passions with their investing habits? Of course, that's so deeply linked to green tech.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's climate, and hopefully for other people, you follow whatever thread is most passionate for you. So it could be healthcare. There's a lot happening there. Many different aspects of venture. You can find a venture fund that's focused on pretty much anything at this point, including diversity, which is great. K4 Capital is a firm that we have collaborated with over the years that has been outstanding in that area as well. So for me, for climate, I mean, we're seeing the effects of it everywhere, and it's intensifying and will materially change the world as we move forward. And it's, there's a lot of doom and gloom the further you look into the research and the data. But what we focus on is really the optimism that there are incredible people building solutions that are having an impact now. And the most important thing that we can do is help scale them and get them, like the answers are here, they're just not distributed evenly yet. And so how can we be creative, not just with venture capital and putting our money in the right places and the right people, but also working with other forms of capital, particularly debt equity and other forms such as project finance, to get these technologies out as quickly as possible. And luckily, solar has been a technology that is a very understood asset class now. It's more solar is deployed every year than any other form of electricity generation, and so it has sort of slid down the commercialization curve. And then the question is, how can we get more technologies pushed down that commercialization curve as quickly as possible so we can make climate action that really puts a dent in the problem?
Ramsay, if you believe the biggest asset managers in the world, they say climate's going to be all the next unicorn. So you're literally investing in this strategy that's going to make the most money and at the same time solve problems. So like this is not just a mission driven thing to do. It's all of the above, right?
It's the biggest economic opportunity of our time. And I think it was polarized in the beginning, especially, 15 years ago when I was starting this work.
So there wasn't any climate problem. Is that what they said, Ramsay? Right?
I don't want to get into the politics, but it was polarized. And then Elon Musk became the wealthiest person in the world, building an electric vehicle company. And all of a sudden it woke everyone up that, okay, this is not just about saving the planet, hugging trees, whatever. This is about making serious money, transitioning the world. So very excited to be doing this work and doing good while also doing well for the planet.
It's great to be able to do both, and I think you saying it's the greatest economic opportunity of a generation is not an overstatement in any way, shape, or form. I'm also seeing a theme of taking a moment, allowing yourself to be a little bit depressed and seeing a problem, and then turning it into an amazing personal opportunity. One of the questions that I did have that was pushed through to me earlier, we half covered, but I'd like everyone's turn on it. Was, is there anything you wish somebody had told or advised you about stepping into the world of VC? Asya, obviously you've got friends that could have maybe given you more of a heads up, but were there any other specific things that, if you could go back to you then, advice that you would have given yourself?
I mean, definitely start investing earlier, because the older you start, the more catch up you have to do. But I did want to share like a quick story of how I actually joined Mendoza Ventures, because I actually, so I was, doing my angel investing and writing these individual checks. I had become an LP in a couple of funds by then already. And then I started, talking to different VC funds about, potentially joining them. And a lot of them just didn't sit right with me because they were just mostly men. And I really felt like I was going to be in all of their PR campaigns, and they were going to finally show that they had a woman of color on their team, finally. And so I tick a lot of the boxes because I'm older, I'm brown, I'm a woman, LGBTQ, et cetera. And so all of these things that were coming out, and I thought I didn't want to be a pawn, right? I didn't want to be used in that way. And so I had a really good friend of mine who is one of the GPs, so Jennifer, who's the GP at Mendoza Ventures, and she and I were talking this whole time, right? And we were talking about different things. We talked about our families, about our, our own just sort of lives, et cetera. And then at one point I was telling her, oh yeah, so I had this interview with such and such a VC firm. And she looked at me and she's like, dummy, why didn't you talk to me? And I was like, huh? And it just didn't even, I was like, what do you mean? Why didn't I talk to you? She's like, I'm a GP at a VC firm. Like, why didn't you tell me you were looking for a VC role? And I was like, you'd want to hire me? Right. And I was like, well, and she's like, yeah, I've been looking. And I was like, dummy, why didn't you tell me you were looking? Right. And so we both had this moment where we're such good friends with each other, but neither one of us actually checked in with the other. And so here we were, super close, always checking in on everything else. But at no point did she reach out to me and say, I need help. And at no point did I reach out to her and say, I need help.
What's so interesting about that, Asya, is everybody on this call, like, do you like to help other people? Does it make you feel good? Yes. So I always say to people, like, you're being selfish if you don't ask for help, because it makes other people's day when they can help you. But we all have this thing in our head, right? We don't want to ask for help. We don't want to be a burden. We're like, oh, she's so busy. Don't say no for other people. It's a gift to them.
That was socialization again, isn't it? Yeah. Ramsay, did you have a comment on that?
I did. Yeah. I think one of the questions that I often ask companies and also other VCs when they're looking for people, because I almost every day get something that's like, hey, we need a head of sales, or we need a principal, or whatever. And so I ask, are you running a fair and open process? And it's a very loaded question, and it's intended to be that way, because if you don't know that your friend is hiring, how are you supposed to know that your friend is hiring, right? And I'm not saying that they're not running a fair and open process, but it has to be public, and we will have more women and people of color in roles if they know that these jobs are available. And when people that are in power positions only access their networks, they end up looking just like themselves, right? So yeah, I've got this great guy from business school that's going to run sales for me, right? That's not a fair and open process. It has to be publicly posted and open. And I think the VC industry is particularly bad at letting folks know that they're looking for team members. And it could be that they just don't want to publicize that they're overstretched and that they need more help. There could be a lot of different reasons for that, but I think that's one area where we could all do better is advertising every single open position, including board roles.
Interesting. That's critical. I love that. I think it's feeding into this socialization piece. Maybe we check in on all the other family pieces and so many other things with our friends, but are we doing, and I don't know, dare I say, do men do it better, but do we think about those networking opportunities and platform opportunities to give to our female friends? I didn't know that's how you got started out at Mendoza.
Yeah, I mean, so I mean, the process itself then was a very long process, but that enabled us to actually start having that discussion then, because that was way back in February or March of this year. And then I joined the team in July. But that was essentially it. It was like, we just didn't even check in with each other on that. And I think, Cassie, men do it better. So I think men, but they do the other side less, again, stereotypically, not as much. And so they're really checking in a lot on the professional side. And I will say, Ramsay, like sometimes I'm okay if women-led firms just stick to their network for a little while, because we kind of need to do that a little bit right now, and bring more women into the fold. But totally understand your point as well about making sure we're running a very open, transparent, fair process that everyone can apply to. And I think it's really important to also look at the intersectional nature of diversity, so that it's not just a gender issue. It's not just, a race issue. But, as you mentioned, it's not just about excluding men, right? But it's excluding the generally privileged people that are always being afforded the opportunities. But meanwhile, you might have someone that grew up in rural America who happens to be a white male, did not go to Stanford, and that also is building something meaningful and deserves funding. I think that's something that is also really important to kind of say.
Well, in groupthink, sorry, go ahead, Nancy. No.
Oh, I was just saying, one way we think about it is differentiated networks, right? So you bring in a diverse team, you have more coverage for pipeline, deal flow, all of those things. So there could be people from all walks of life who have differentiated networks, but somehow quantifying that or giving it more common lingo, I think could be helpful, because
we have
really
something
does make the difference.
Yeah, we have something internally where we say we have to break our network every quarter. And so for example, amongst our partnership, if I'm very comfortable in the fintech space, I need to go out and find something in the PE space. If for example, Scott is just very strong in the sports LP space, he needs to start looking at, finding some opportunity in a female LP space, for example. And so we just talk about every quarter, we all as partners need to find a way to break our network. And so essentially step out of our comfort zone. And you have to do that once a year.
That's really great framing. Yeah.
One of the things we know in addition to the networks is that when you have all the same type of person, groupthink happens. And so if you have a diverse group of people making decisions together, it up games everybody performs better. There's great data about this. You have got to, think about what you're missing out on perspective when you don't have women and people of color in the decision-making roles. They're not going to find the biggest, win companies, because they're looking at everything. Pattern recognition is how you think about VCs, right? People are just literally reinforcing the exact same model that we've had before, and that's not going to win tomorrow.
Absolutely. I realized that we only got Asya's answer to that question. So in terms of what you wish someone might have told you, what you would have told your previous self, Ramsay, do you have any thoughts on that? I know we did speak about a very funny-ish story about, how we're moving away from explicit discrimination. We spoke about toilets that your mum visited in Japan, which is a very niche story, but are there, you know, particular pieces of wisdom that you wish you'd had earlier in your journey?
I don't know. Can you come back to me? I need to think
Of
about
course.
that.
Yeah.
I think I got it. So,
Okay.
I think that there's still a significant problem around diversity in the boardroom. And this is not retrospective earlier career, but something I'm noodling on now and would love to hear from you all at some point, either now or later. It's like, how can we make change in one generation there? It feels like a 12-pointed star. There's a lot of different factors leading to it, and would love to see significant leaps forward in one generation. So that would be my wish.
It's a requirement for us.
Yeah.
And investment. Yeah. Go ahead, Julie.
So well, one of the things that we've done is I was part of passing a law in California on public company board diversity. So it moved from 12% public company directors in California were women. Now it's 32%. We did that in like 7 years, really. So super fast, and it's having downward pressure on. So now so we place women on boards in my other entity, and literally, you know, everyone's coming to me saying, I need 2 women because I'm going to IPO, because it's required. The asset management firms will not invest anymore in companies if you don't have at least 2 women on your board. But 58% of all private companies don't have a single woman on their board. So, you know, I just think it's got to be mainstreamed that it's a risk. It creates risk for you. Product recalls happen 3 times faster when you have diversity on a board, when you have women in the boardroom. We're talking about, you know, really bad decision making that can happen if you're not careful if you're not diverse. So venture capital has a long way to go. And part of the problem is we don't have enough women who are the VCs who are taking the board seats. So we got to fix it from the bottom up, if you ask me. We're putting downward pressure, but I don't know that that's going to get us fast enough there.
That's an interesting statistic. What was your steer on that? Yeah.
We won't invest in a company. So we just essentially, it's a requirement. And so we say, hey, we don't see a female board member, and it just is what it is.
So do you give the companies an option to correct that and actually make an investment once they've corrected it?
Absolutely. And we can put it into side letters. We can put it into the terms of the investment itself, so that it's we can actually go ahead and just sort of assist in finding a board member. We can take a board seat ourselves. And so there are different ways that we can do it to remedy it. But essentially, if you have no plans to improve the diversity of your founding team, no plans to improve the diversity of your executive team and your board makeup, then we are not interested in investing. But you don't have to come that way, because like we understand also that some education is required, and a lot of folks just haven't thought about it that way. And so we take on that role of saying, hey, you've got a great company. We see real promise in you as a founder. Have you thought about this? No. Here, are you open to thinking about this? Are you open to this way of being more profitable by having a diverse team? And we show them that they will make more money if they do this right thing. And then we help them get there. And so now if you have someone that's completely resistant to it, well, frankly, we don't want to work with you.
That's enough information.
That's enough information, you know, in and of itself. But in all of the cases that we've come across, they've all welcomed it and said, yes, we do want to do this.
That's fantastic.
Really. Well, we've run completely and fully to time because the conversation has been so detailed and incredibly insightful. So I really just wanted to say thank you all for giving up your time. This has been an incredible session, and I know it's one that's going to be immensely valuable to everyone. One in our fintech network, of course, in our green tech and climate tech focus network, VC connections and beyond. The recording for this event will be accessible afterwards. So if you would like access to that, please do get in touch. And the white paper that we will generate off the back of this, it will detail the discussion today, the toolkit that we recommend to women execs stepping into VC. That will get sign off from all three of you and any additional pieces of wisdom that didn't make it into the call today. But yeah, first and foremost, it's just a huge thank you to our panel, Asya, Ramsay, and Julie as well for your time. It's been my absolute pleasure and privilege speaking with you all today.